Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm seeing lots of people come in, so thank you, thank you. We're excited that you guys are here. We're gonna wait just a couple minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, Mayor Silvestrini. Your Wasatch Choice session was awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. It was so nice to hear about Mill Creek. Let's see. Hi, Helen, Salt Lake County. How are you doing? I don't think you can respond back, but good to see you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you can reply back. Good.
Yes. Yep. I'm in control.
Good. I've been on so many where people can't reply back, and then I look kind of silly waiting for a reply, and then I realize that they can't reply. So we're glad you're here. Bill, how are you doing? How's your city doing? Bill Kobe?
He's muted.
I'm on mute. That's always exciting to join a Zoom call and be on mute. Have a whole conversation with yourself. No, Pleasant View's doing great. Thanks, Katie.
Good. Hi, Mayor Hell. How are you doing?
Also on mute, I guess.
All right. Well, if it's okay with the presenters, we'll go ahead and get started. So we just want to welcome you all to this session, Communicating Growth Considerations, a roundtable on having hard conversations. I would also like to thank Jason, who is with ITE. He's our tech guru that we get the pleasure of working with on this session. Your presenters and moderators have worked really hard at putting together valuable information to share with you. And before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about each one of the extremely knowledgeable presenters that you get the opportunity to listen to today. Eileen Barron was unfortunately unable to join us today. However, I want to thank her for all of the work that she's put into the Wasatch Choice Communications Working Group, along with all the work that she put into this session. Justin Smart specializes in strategic communication, particularly in public engagement. He has focused his career on communication and outreach for civic issues and projects with an emphasis in transportation. Having worked on both Utah's Capitol Hill and in the kitchens and living rooms of everyday Utahns, Justin brings a policy-level perspective to his day-to-day grassroots practice. A graduate from Utah State University, Justin has also completed professional mediation and facilitation training, along with engagement courses through the International Association for Public Participation. Tom Carter has worked alongside Eileen as the co-chair of the Wasatch Choice Communications Working Group. Tom is the executive director for the Utah Clean Air Partnership. UCARE is a nonprofit organization established to bring communities together with one goal in mind: improving Utah's air. Tom has a diverse background, including work in the political and policy arena, alongside international experience in professional sports. In the policy world, he has served as an elected official in New Jersey and has also worked on policy initiatives in New Jersey and Utah tied to healthcare and transportation, respectively. Tom's professional sports background includes growing Major League Baseball's operations in Australia and helping to build a new indoor football league here in the United States. Tom grew up in the Northeast and went to Brigham Young University in Provo. Now at UCARE, Tom sits on the Board of Governors for the Salt Lake Chamber, the Governor's Energy Advisory Council, and the co-chairs for Healthy Salt Lake Steering Committee. Tom was named a Utah Business 40 Under 40 in 2019. He works diligently to bring partners together for collective impact in addressing Utah's air quality challenges. Next, we have Trustee Beth Holbrook. Trustee Holbrook brings a wealth of experience to UTA. She began her career in the financial sector, established a real estate firm in 2002, and in 2010 went on to work for Zions Bank as the director of the Business Resource Center in Salt Lake City. Trustee Holbrook would go on to become the Public Sector Solutions Manager for Waste Management of Utah. She was first elected to the Bountiful City Council in 2007 and has served on several boards, including the Bountiful Power Commission, Planning Commission, and the Utility Facility Review Board. She is the outgoing president of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, having served there since 2011. We have Alex Roy, who is the transportation planner and project manager for the Wasatch Front Regional Council, Community and Economic Development Group. Throughout his career, he has strived to be part of projects that are the nexus of innovation and implementability, while also recognizing the desires of the existing community and the needs of the future. Alex has facilitated public meetings in Hawaii and Utah with roles in both the private and public sectors. He is a graduate of the University of Utah, earning his bachelor's in sociology and master's in city and metropolitan planning. And last but not least, we have Jay Aguilar. Jay is the UDOT Long Range Planning Manager. He works with communities and transportation agency partners to develop a long-range planning vision for the state. Jay has been a professional land use and transportation planner at the city, county, region, and state level for more than 25 years. He has worked in California, Utah, and Hawaii. So we just want to thank all of our presenters for joining us today. We want this session to be as interactive as possible. Throughout this session, there'll be a presentation, there'll be 4 breakout rooms that we'll separate into, and then we'll have plenty of room for conversation. Please leave your questions and your comments in the chat box, and Justin will include them into the overall flow of the presentation. Before I turn the time over to Justin, we want to run a quick poll just to find out who's joining us today. So Jason, if you could just pop that up on the screen, and if everybody could go ahead and select which one best suits you, that would be great. Looks like we have a large participation on this session. Let's see, go through here. Welcome, Sherry Jackson. We're happy that you're here. Dawn Fitzpatrick, I'm happy you're here. You've been on a couple of my sessions that I've been included in, and it's great to see you again. Hugh from Wasatch Front Regional Council, thanks for joining us. Mayor Silvestrini from Mill Creek, we're happy that you're here. So if you've had a chance, go ahead and select that, that option that works best for you. And then Jason, if you'll go ahead and pull that up so we can see who's on the call, that would be great. So it looks like we have the majority of our members, our council members. So welcome everybody. We're so happy that you're here. I want to go ahead and turn the time over to Justin. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Katie. That was a lot of words and you managed them very, very well. So we appreciate that. I just want to address the elephant in the room right away. For those of you really excited to come hear from Eileen Barron, who I've worked with for a couple of decades now and have tremendous respect for, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're getting me. I'm gonna do my best, and I can assure you that this auspicious group that Katie has just introduced will more than back me up and make up for the deficiencies that I present, not having Eileen with us today. So I want to just share with you some slides. I want to frame this a little bit in that this is meant to be a really interactive session, and there's going to be quite a bit of time dedicated to telling stories, to swapping experiences and learning from each other. And so we're excited about that. Let me get my slides up here, and we will go from there. So I want to arrange a couple of things. So you should be seeing our title slide, Communicating Growth Considerations. Can somebody give me a thumbs up or a nod? Okay, good, excellent. So I want to give you just a sampling of the genesis of this presentation. So you've heard a little bit today and hopefully throughout this conference about the Wasatch Choice 2050, and we appreciate the League's partnership on helping move this message and this conversation forward. I'm confident that we have people on the call or in the meeting today that maybe don't fall within the area for which the Wasatch Choice vision was devised, but I am also confident that there are principles and topics and takeaways from this discussion that will help just about anybody in our state, because the principal tenet behind the Wasatch Choice is that growth is a perennial issue in our state, and it's in large part because of our enviable quality of life. We have so much going for us here in Utah. in terms of economic activity, in terms of access to the outdoors and recreational opportunities, in terms of just good people. There was a session I listened in on yesterday about the values ladders of Utahns, and so much revolves around just the people that are here. And we know that growth is primarily internal. It's our kids and our grandkids that are desiring to stay here and build a life here. And we also have quite a bit of in-migration, so we're diversifying. But all of those principles that underlie the Wasatch Choice vision are true of just about any city, any community across the state. And so this Wasatch Choice vision is meant to be a blueprint for maintaining that quality of life even as we grow. And again, that can be applicable across Utah. But we also know that we have this vision, but there is no one size fits all. In fact, Andrew Gruber said that earlier ahead of the general session. There is no one solution, no silver bullet to make a community thrive in the face of this rapid growth. That's true also within communities. We know that folks in our communities have different ideas of what quality of life means. Some think that that's country living, and country living means 5 acres. I live in Erta, Utah, in Tooele County, and I can tell you we've had a number of warm discussions about growth and about what quality of life means. And there are a lot of different definitions in my community about that. And so those different definitions, those differences of opinion often lead to these hard conversations. And that was the genesis really of one of the efforts of the Wasatch Choice Communications subcommittee that Katie mentioned earlier, of which Eileen and Tom Carter are co-chairs. And one of the things that committee started to wrestle with is what kind of resources could we provide to local government elected officials, to local government staff, and those others who are part of these conversations that would be helpful in dealing with these really difficult conversations. And that was where the session was born. And what we hope is that we've crafted a session that will help in some way, maybe give you an idea, give you a model, have you hear from somebody else that is struggling with the same thing and something that they tried that worked. Whatever it is, we hope you'll take something out of this session that will help you in these difficult conversations that we're all having. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, they're happening and they're absolutely challenging. And so I'll go forward with one more, just talk. First of all, we've got a poll that I'll introduce here in a second that's just meant to kind of get a handle on some of the topics that we know you're wrestling with and how often you're hearing about them. Then we're gonna spend a good deal of time breaking into groups to storytell. Just like I said, the 4 folks that Katie introduced earlier, Jay and Tom and Trustee Holbrook and Alex Roy, they'll be our moderators and they'll walk us through some conversations around a few topics. And then they're going to come back and report to the whole group what some of those key been from those dialogues. And then we've got a model that's pretty simple, but we think it could be helpful to many of you when you're in the heat of the moment, figuring out a way to maybe disarm whoever it is that might be coming at you with a pitchfork or a torch and move the conversation in a more positive direction. And then we've got a couple of volunteers who I'll introduce when we get to that point, who are going to then demonstrate how that model might work. So with that as an agenda, if our friend Jason can put the poll up, we're going to ask you to take this poll quickly and just give everybody a sense of what you're hearing about. So our first question, you can take this as quickly as you want, but I'm just going to walk through it. Number 1, which of these topics seem to come up most frequently? And growth, housing, density, transportation. Some of you might want an all of the above button, but we're not going to give that to you. So pick one of those options. And then the second question, how frequently do you find yourself engaged in talking about these topics? A couple times a month, a couple times a week, a couple times a day, or all the time? And then finally, how do you feel about the conversations you are having? They're energizing and give you hope. They feel like the same conversation on repeat over and over again. they feel combative and unproductive, or finally they're draining and make me dread going out in public. So if you can take these three questions quickly, when we've had a reasonable enough response, Jason will pull up the results here and we'll talk them through for just a minute. Maybe we needed some Jeopardy music here. Ah, there we go. Perfect. Thank you, Jason. So it looks like density seems to be the topic of the day, followed pretty closely by growth, and then housing and transportation kind of neck and neck there toward the third place. And we recognize, frankly, that there's a lot of overlap in these topics. You know, certainly you're not hearing about just one, maybe, but it's interesting that density seems to be the main topic. Number two, hearing about them once or twice a week, and I'm kind of pairing this with our previous poll that said we had primarily we had elected officials with us, city council people. So interesting that you're hearing about it that frequently. And then finally, same conversation over and over again, far and away, the first one. I guess I'm pleased that there's only 2% that are ready to just hole up and not go out in public anymore. And only 20 that say it's combative and unproductive. But it's not a positive certainly to say that it feels like the same conversation over and over again. So hopefully through the storytelling and the model that we'll present, you'll have some tools to maybe move it off dead center and make some progress. So thanks for taking that poll. Let me jump back over here and move my slides forward. So just quickly, some objectives for our roundtable today. We want you to be able to maybe vent a little bit. Certainly you're among friends. As I was looking through some of the participants, a lot of folks, and you could see the poll that said who was here, you're with people that know and have experienced a lot of the things, a lot of the kinds of conversations that are being had right now. So hopefully you can get a sense that we're in this together. Also, again, take away some ideas from what other people have tried, and maybe it didn't work. And so you know not to try that, or it worked really well, and hey, I can try that next time I get into this conversation or on this topic. And then again, to share that conversation model with you, that hopefully will conversations like not as big of an issue with confrontational dialogue, but at least not having the same conversation again and again, but moving it forward. So with that as kind of an intro, we're going to jump straight into this moderated section of our session. So I've already mentioned that we have Tom and Jay and Trustee Holbrook and Alex Roy here to guide us. Their role is really to help the conversation happen effectively. I doubt that they'll really throw in a lot of content because the ideas that you're sharing with one another, but certainly these folks have stories and have battle scars and could engage really effectively as well. But we've got about 35 minutes, so it's about 3:20 now. So we'll keep an eye on the clock, and Katie has volunteered to give each breakout group a kind of a heads up when you're about 5 minutes out and about 1 minute out, so that everybody can kind of prepare to wrap up. But just let me walk you through the nuts and bolts of this real quickly, and then let me talk about these questions first. So as you share your experiences on these 4 topics that we've thrown up in the poll, and that I'll just repeat one more time: growth, housing, density, and transportation. So be thinking about what one of those topics might interest you the most, because here in a minute you'll have a chance to join a conversation on one of those topics. But maybe you've got a story where you can share something that worked really well. Maybe you've got a story where I tried this and the citizen ended up really, really upset. Or, I tried this instead, and what suggestions you might have. So again, the idea of sharing experiences and sharing tips. So we've organized the Zoom into 4 breakout groups, and you'll be able to choose one. And as soon as that dialog box goes up, you'll find yourself in the room as soon as you choose it, and you'll be with a moderator and a note taker. And just one final note before we throw up the options for you to choose. As I mentioned in this working group that we have, we've been talking about providing some sort of a resource to communities throughout the state. And this is going to help us move that forward. We've got to start on that around these 4 topics, but the note takers are going to help us capture these suggestions and these what worked and what didn't, and we can use that to move the tool that we're producing forward. So we appreciate your engagement today. And the last thing I'll say is maybe consider turning your camera on so that we can all see each other and have a little more personal. But with that, Jason, if you can throw up the options and you can just choose whichever topic is interesting to you, and we'll see everybody back together in about 35 minutes.
Hi, this is Michelle. I think Robert's talking, but I can't hear him. Is it just me?
I'm here as well. I don't know. I thought I was under the impression we'd get to choose a group. I'm not really sure what's going on.
That's what I thought
just
too, but
joined.
I'm not seeing any options to choose from.
Robert, are you muted? I thought you were saying something, but I couldn't hear you.
So Jared Stewart, when did you go to work for Tooele City?
Hello, Mayor. Very recently, this is week 2.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it's
Are you still living in Mill Creek, or did you move?
I have not moved to Tooele yet, but I am actually living downtown.
Okay.
So, which
Good luck.
not too much of a commute from downtown to Tooele. It's about 30 minutes. Seems like it's 300 miles out here, but it's only 30 miles back.
Well, that's what we can talk about when we get to this. I always tell people that if we want everybody to live in Grantsville and Tooele, no offense, then let's not have density in Salt Lake Valley. But it's not a very good solution for air quality.
Losing Jared is still too painful to talk about at the moment. We're sad he's gone.
Well, thanks, Ryan. I miss you guys too. Salt Lake County was an excellent place to be.
So I wonder if those of us who were placed in this breakout room are supposed to choose what we want to discuss.
There's 48 of us in here. I'm having a hard time thinking that that's what they intended.
Yeah,
I think it must be having some kind of problem.
Weren't there about 50 or weren't there like 60 of us in the whole thing? So
Right.
I think the breakouts would have been smaller if it was that quick.
I didn't see see the count at the beginning, so sorry.
So are you guys still all
and
in? Are you guys all in still the main session, or are you?
Yeah, Katie, it didn't give us an option to pick if that was the intent. So it looks like it kind of took out all the moderators and the rest of us are still here.
Okay, let me reply to. right, Jason, with ITE, can you help us figure out, looks like 48 people never got the option to join a group. Can you
Yeah,
put that?
we're looking into it right now.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Sorry, everybody, for the inconvenience. Hopefully, I'm glad to know this, though. Jay and myself were a little bit self-conscious that nobody wanted to join our group, so I'm glad that this is the reason why.
Yeah, Tom and I were likewise. We saw that number on density and we figured we'd have a packed house, and then it was us and one other person.
Well, at least you had one. We didn't have any, so.
So apologies, people, folks. I'm sure we
Yes.
can get this resolved.
So while we're waiting, how has everyone else's time been for the conference? Have you guys enjoyed the sessions that you've been able to participate in? Have you learned some information? Are you able to take anything back to your city and county and use it as implementation?
I have a whole bunch of note cards here that are filled from top to bottom, front and back, that I now have the opportunity of reviewing again and pulling out the best parts to share. So yeah, it's been good.
We are happy to hear that, Mayor. Thank you so much for being here.
So Katie, do you know, will the league or WFRC have some of these Zoom meetings on the website? So if we missed some of them, we can go back and look at other ones?
Yes, every one of the sessions has been recorded, and so you will be able to access every session once this is all over. I know that they'll be putting them on the league will add them to their YouTube channel, and then we'll share also with, we'll put the information in our newsletter too, so that we can get as many links out there and let as many people know. Okay. So yes.
That's great, because tomorrow I know there's like 3 of them that I was like, oh, those all look so interesting, and they're all at the same time, so.
I know, it's hard because there's so many sessions that are so good and you want to attend all of them and you can't do that. So yes, I'm very happy that we're able to go back and view. Jason, how is it coming? Are we able to pop those breakout sessions back up on the screen for people to choose?
I have sent you a private message if you could just check that really fast.
Okay, so Jason, or Justin, it looks like we can either assign people individually or we can just separate people separate equal numbers into each group. I'm thinking with the time, I think that probably would be the easiest option. Are you okay with doing that? It looks like they're not able to let people select the session that they're wanting to join.
Oh, shoot. Well, I think we're just going to have to call an audible here. And I hope everybody's okay if we just go ahead and break everybody up, just kind of in equal numbers into the 4 groups. I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. We appreciate your patience. Sorry about that. And if you want to tell your story about density in the growth group, go ahead and do it. Nobody's going to stop you. So let's, Jason, why don't you make that so, as Captain Picard would say. And good luck in your conversations.
Yes, and then Jason, if you could also move the moderators and the note takers back to their respective groups.
This is going to be like an Avengers movie where some of us just turn into dust right before each other. Right?
I like it, Mayor. I like it a lot.
That's good. Yeah, we currently have a countdown of about 30 seconds before we're able to relaunch the break rooms.
Okay.
Okay. So for those of you that just rejoined us because you somehow made it into a breakout room, we had a technical issue where most of the group was not able to choose a group. So we're just dividing everybody evenly, and the moderators will just take it from there with their note takers once we get separated. And like Mayor Silvestrini said, it might just be dust here in 5 seconds. I don't know what the countdown looks like, but buckle up.
Does that make you Thanos, Justin?
I don't like that. I don't like that insinuation at all.
I think that makes Mayor Silvestrini Captain America. That's all I'm saying. That's what I'm putting.
I don't know. Better that than one of the dust people, right?
Right.
That's true. We
Okay, I think we've just figured it out. We are working on it right now.
Okay,
It looks like
looks like we're back.
okay. Lest we all get whiplash going back and forth, here's what I think we're going to do. We're going to call yet another audible at the line of scrimmage here. And I think that we're going to go topic by topic and stick together as a group. I'm not sure whether the technology has just failed us altogether or what's happened, but hopefully everybody can be patient and we'll just listen to one another's conversations. And I'm sure that there's plenty of stories to be told amongst this group. Jason, tell me one more time if there's a hope of us hopping into 4 different groups, or if not, we'll just continue ahead.
No, it looks like we are best just continuing ahead.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks for your efforts. So, all right, let's continue with the idea that we'll use our moderators, and we'll just go topic by topic. And let's start with growth, which is kind of the big gorilla in the room, like we talked about earlier. And so I need to refresh my memory as to who our growth. I know who our 4 moderators are, but not what they were assigned to.
I'm growth.
Growth. All right, Alex, do you want to lead out on growth, maybe with those 3 questions that we had to get people primed and thinking, and then we'll go from there?
Sure. Do you want me to share my screen, or are you going to share yours just for the question?
You know what? I can do it, so you can focus on getting us rolling.
Okay. So hi, everyone. As Justin said, we're kind of hoping that this is a pretty conversational topic. While we were in the breakout room, Hugh and I were talking about how everyone, deals with growth. Sometimes it's like more of a natural assumption, and that the communities will be growing rather than like the impacts of growth. Like we saw some, transportation impacts or housing impacts or density impacts. Growth is almost assumed to be covering all of the topic areas. So I think it kind of makes sense that we started here. So as you see the screen, some things we could talk about are, if the community is anti-growth, they think the impacts of that will disappear. Clearly they won't. Growth pretty much around the region has been growing pretty rapidly. The second one is I don't want any more growth. If we don't plan for it, it won't come to my area, kind of the head in the sand. And then until there's enough infrastructure in my area, we shouldn't have more growth. And I think, as being in the transportation field, this is something we hear a lot, that, it's not necessarily opposed to growth. It's more like we're not ready for growth. So with that, I'd love to hear what people have to say about some growth issues that they've overcome, or, current issues with growth. Like what has worked, what has, not worked so well. Do you have any recommendations? So, yeah, anyone want to pipe in? I think everyone's muted, so if you're going to talk, you probably have to unmute yourself.
So I'll jump in first. I'm Jeff Silverstein. I'm mayor of Mill Creek, and
hi, Mayor.
Hi. So for those of you who probably know, but we're right next to Salt Lake City. Our northern boundary is Salt Lake City, and so we're facing growth pressures like everybody else, but from the context of a of a built out community where we don't have a lot of vacant land. And so a lot of what we're seeing is infill development and development that's going vertical. And so density, okay? And, you know, we have residents that are constantly saying, you know, freeze the zoning, don't allow this. Why are you building more apartments? And, you know, the answer to that, I think, if I have an opportunity to actually sit down and talk to people, you can kind of explain it. They may not go away happy or convinced, but at least maybe more understanding of it. The kinds of things I try to stress are this. First of all, this growth is mostly, you know, 2/3 of it is our kids. And our kids and our grandkids need a place to live, okay? And then secondly, you know, given our physical location immediately next to the capital city, you know, the pressures of growth on us are tremendous, maybe more outlying areas, because if you look at cities around the world, they densify. Land becomes more expensive and they go vertical. So, you know, so I try to talk to people about how, you know, it's important for us to plan to manage that growth rather than letting it happen haphazardly, so that we get something out of it at the end of the day, so that we don't sacrifice our quality of life. And that does require the planning effort. So when the city is acting to plan things, we're actually, you know, trying to keep control of the situation, and then constantly balancing, you know, the things we like about our community with you know, kind of inevitability in a way, and also, you know, private property rights. I mean, for a lot of my constituents, if I can get them to talk about private property rights, if this is your property, would you want to be told what you can or can't do with it? That works with some. And then if I don't get anywhere with that, I tell them a story about, if we don't allow growth in Mill Creek, then, you know, we're going to see growth in other areas. And people for years have told us that they don't want to see sprawl. And you know, the other thing in my community, air quality is a big issue. And I can talk to them about the fact that if people are going to all go live in Morgan or live in Grantsville, not to pick on communities, but, you know, those are places that are growing as well. But if the more development happens on these outer areas, the more congestion we have to deal with and the worse air quality we have. And so, yeah, there are going to be some sacrifices, but the key is to plan growth and put it where we want it to be. And anyway, that helps with some people. I mean, like I said, I don't think everybody goes away happy, but that's the kind of conversations I think we have to have.
This is Mayor Hale of Midvale. Midvale is an old city, like parts of Mill Creek are. It was first settled in 1849. And I have studied a lot of the history of the Union area where I live, as well as Midvale City Center, which was the mining center when it started. Mine milling and everything. And I think about the history of the changes of society, housing, streets, parks, schools, everything about society since 1849 have changed hundreds of times. People have had to adapt from an agrarian society to a suburban to now an urban center without even moving. And that's hard for people to imagine forward another 20, 30 years, what it's going to be like. All they have to do is look in reverse, look in the rearview mirror, see how much things have changed in the last 20 or 30 years. And are we going to ask society to just stop dead? That ain't going to happen. And so people have to settle down and realize that they created part of what Midvale is today, which was a shock to those that had been there 20 or 30 years before them. And it's going to happen again. And that's just the way it is for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in real quick. We're kind of shifting on the fly here. We're going to give each topic about 7 minutes. So we got a couple more minutes on growth, and then we'll move on to housing. Or should we move on to housing now?
I mean, we kind of hit the topics of housing, and I think what Mayor Silvestrini highlighted, that, you know, having conversations of trade-offs and preservation of certain areas, and Mayor Hale mentioned as well too, is, you know, growth is coming. How do we kind of facilitate that growth to the community that we want to see? You know, whether that's transportation in different areas, you know, transportation investments and density around those, or if that's kind of, you know, nodes of growth understanding. I think, you know, the next few topics really all feed into this kind of growth and how do we want growth to look. So yeah, thanks for the feedback.
Oh,
Go ahead.
So I'm Lisa Zumft. I'm on the town council in Springdale, down here at Zion National Park. And so we don't have quite the same concerns that Midvale and Mill Creek have. We have so little land, and we've grown, but we're only a population of maybe I don't know if we've hit 600 yet. And of course, I think you all know that we have a lot of tourism. But our population has been losing the young people. They can't afford to live here, and people with money have been moving in and building on land. And our density, our formal density is 3/4 of an acre or larger. We have some areas that have some density, but they are now non-compliant. And as we've been talking about, because this kind of moves also into housing, that if we cannot get the new people moving in who think that it's going to stay the way it was the day they moved here, and they're moving in mostly from out of state, that if we don't look ahead in 30 years, we're not going to have an elementary school anymore, which is still only 55 students. We're going to have houses that are so expensive, we can't have young people that can afford to live here. And so, and we can build out to about 3 times what we have now. So what we're trying to do is help our public understand what we can do for them to know that they can't continuously resist this, because as they resist, all they're doing is putting off things that are going to happen. And we're struggling with trying to understand how we can convince them. Personally, I would love to see us never grow. I would love that, but that's not the case, as Mayor Hale just mentioned. It's happening, so we need to figure out how to do it. So I'm appreciating, and I'm going to appreciate hearing more from people about how they are managing to convince their residents that they need to participate in the growth that's going to happen and not just continue to resist it. Thank you.
I'm Barton Breyer. I've been a planner for several different cities, and this issue always comes up. One thing I found very effective is you got to find community champions. I know in one city we had the first meetings had a lady come out just very opposed to everything we were doing, but she brought up a lot of very coherent points. She had a lot of good ideas. And so we said, hey, she can be a champion. And so we worked with her. We gave her a lot of information. We met with her a lot of times. When we had public hearings, we'd have her stand up and speak. And in the end, she was the main advocate for our growth plan because she was part of it. She became our champion. So sometimes you got to go into your communities and find who those champions will be and give them a voice.
A good universal tip, Barton. Thank you for that. Let's transition now over to housing. And Jay, I don't know if you want to give us a little prelude and then jump in, or let others jump in, but we've got a pretty good conversation going already. Jay, you're on mute.
I'm always being muted by somebody, usually myself. Okay, so do you want to share that screen, the multifamily housing, the 3 points?
Sure.
Rather than me reading through it, why don't you just take a look at this? And we'd love to hear more of your input, both pro and con, on how to deal with these 3 commonly heard statements.
All right, everyone, don't all of you jump in at once. I know you're all anxious to share your input on housing, but who would like to go first? Let's take.
I will.
Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in our community of Santaquin, growth, housing, and density are all very closely linked and intertwined. So our residents are viewing growth as multifamily housing, and they most of them don't like it. They don't want it, and the main reason that they use is because they want to preserve our agricultural land and our orchards. And we're having a really hard time helping our residents understand that in order to better preserve the orchards, we need to take a close look at where certain types of housing is located within our city, and that if those housing options and a variety of housing don't take up as much land, there's an automatic result in helping to preserve the orchards and the ag land, because not as much land is being used for housing and not as much additional infrastructure is being built and put in. So that doesn't put as much of a strain and an impact on our current systems. And just as an example, we had a resident 2 weeks ago who submitted a comment to the public forum of our meeting. She submitted an email and requested that it be read in our meeting. So it was read. The mayor asked me if I would follow up with her and have a conversation to answer her questions about growth, housing, and density. So I contacted her. She refused to meet with me. She refused to have a phone call. She refused to sit down and have a conversation. She insisted that I only respond to her through email. The reason was because she previously has taken email and copied it and into Facebook and shared it on Facebook and then created a firestorm on Facebook. So that's kind of part of what we're dealing with in our community. When she got mad that I would, offer to have a conversation with her to answer her questions, but would not email, she took our conversation and posted it on Facebook and said, Councilmember Montoya is refusing to answer my questions. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. I really am an advocate for a variety of housing options. I think it makes for a healthier community, a more diverse community. And it's a challenge all the way around. I don't know. Maybe we're the only ones who are dealing with that, right? I don't think so, but I'd like to hear from others maybe what their experiences are too, because we're dealing with a lot of divisiveness right now.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Any other things that you would do differently based on past experiences? Or suggestions for Betsy?
Hi, this is Nika Peterson from Clearfield City Council. And Councilwoman, listening to you, I just sat and chuckled because it's so much of what we're dealing with in our community. And I love your approach, though, of let's sit and talk in person and be able to keep government conversations in a good forum. In Clearfield, we're one of the unique communities that actually had a huge stock of multifamily to start. And it's one of the things that has scared our residents the most, because there was a much more relaxed approach in how it came in. It wasn't balanced. It tended to be more subsidized housing that really overwhelmed our community and overwhelmed our school system and made it a real strain on our other community partners like churches and charitable groups. And so the fear has been, why would you allow this to come into our community when we have struggled for decades to handle the impact that's already there? And our approach as a council has been so much of what you've already identified. The growth is already coming. Yet we've seen in our own community exactly what happens when there isn't a very aggressive and purposeful approach to where that growth goes and how it's balanced. You know, I can't change what happened 30 years ago, but my job is to make sure that we've learned those lessons, and going forward, we're clearly carving out where that, where the housing types are going to be. So I would make the messaging, number one, the individual, the one-on-one conversations, even though it feels like I'm having them constantly, have been the most beneficial, especially when you can frame it from the perspective of, and where do our kids go? Where are these places for people to be? Because it immediately stigmatizes, particularly in our community where we've had a lot of subsidized housing. We're trying to get away from the conversations of those people, those apartment dwellers, and the stigma that comes with multifamily as being degenerate, crime-ridden, and a component of our community that's not valued. And so we're trying to humanize that. The second thing, though, speaking especially to the last comments, we've realized as a city, we need to do a better job of telling our story so that that narrative does not play out, particularly in social media, in a way that doesn't tell a story. We've been really aggressive in our social media campaigns, and we've got great readership in our newsletter, but we've even this week have realized we have to take it a step further. And now as a council, we're going to be looking at actually going out and having professional videos done and a standalone website as part of our redevelopment of our website anyway, that specifically talks about the growth and in a visual manner that people relate to, demystifies this and tells the why, and makes this about people and what we're trying to do, but it gets away from some of the jargon. We're not getting into form-based code. We're not getting into density metrics, not because we're dumbing it down, but because we need to make this conversational and find those touch points in our community to become familiar. And where our community may not have the same vision just because they haven't been waist deep in it for years, to say, okay, our job can be to show you. The mayor had said it's hard to get people to imagine forward. And so we've thought, okay, let's use the tools at our disposal with digital mediums to almost make a trailer for our community and say, here's what we're trying to do and why. Come along with us. And let's talk about how growth can look in Clearfield, but stop hashing out over again, should it even be allowed at all?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's shift gears. This is good dialogue. And pass the baton to Tom. I've shared the density slide here with a few statements. Tom, do you want to give us a quick intro?
Yeah, so I think the intro, everything I was going to say, Councilwoman Peterson just said. I think what we're hearing a lot as it relates to density is kind of caught in these bullet points. We need to be aware, and we need to be engaged, and we need to find ways to have the conversation. I think what I'd like to throw out to the group is you see some of these statements that we wrote previous to that, and our statements that have already been shared during our dialogue. My question is, do people want to be persuaded, or do they come to you with their mind already made up and trying to change your mind? And is there room for you or us as a community to find that way to have a fruitful dialogue that helps people see, density, as Councilwoman Montoya said, is beneficial to our aggressive plan?
I think it helps to start with good data, that sets the stage for the discussion to address problem solving. Tom.
What else are people experiencing in the conversations around density? In my experiences, it's a lot of that, as Councilwoman Peterson said, those people and crime and apartment dwellers. Is that something everybody else is experiencing in their conversations? Seeing a lot of yeses. How do you respond to that kind of dialogue?
I have asked residents if when they were young adults or young marrieds, if they ever rented. And for many of them, it helps them remember that they had to start somewhere. And that even if they don't have kids who are local or grandkids who are local, there are others who are also just trying to start somewhere. And anyway, for some that is effective, and for others it's not.
Yeah, I'd agree. I almost, point at myself sometimes in these kind of conversations and say, okay, well, my demographic, I'm younger still. That's where I'm living. I'm not in a single family house or a more traditional neighborhood, I guess you could say. And I think helping people have that understanding that you need options for every stage of life is crucial. And just kind of, pointing at different groups and normalizing that.
And I'd like to kind of pipe in on that too. I kind of try to do a little bit of humor with it, because majority of the growth, and I'm from Layton, is a lot from our kids, and we're hearing a lot about the density, is, asking them, where did you live, like was mentioned before, when you were first married, or where do we anticipate our children are going? And if we don't have this housing form, we have two options. And one is they're going to leave, or they're going to live in our basement. And, when you kind of frame it that way, a lot of them, I think, start to see that it is our kids that need these places. And our kids are not the troublemakers, and they're not the crime that, they're our families. And I've had a lot of people kind of understand a little bit more why we're going the apartment townhome. I think everybody's seeing it. The one comment I get is that they feel like we're the only city doing it. Why is Layton doing all of these townhomes and all of these apartments? And I just offer for them to drive, and I point out Clearfield and Syracuse is building apartments and things like that, it's all over the state. We've got to have housing for our families.
And I'll say the word density is poison. Like the word odor, what's your favorite odor? How much odor do you want? Well, I want no odor. How much density do you want? I want no density. I want very low density. So I think you got to use different words. You can talk about housing types, life cycle housing, but the word density is poison.
I think talking about the missing middle housing, more is helpful too. We kind of are starting to recognize that phrase often, fourplexes, duplexes, things that are not apartments and not single family homes. But, I think if we help people understand that the design of density, I guess, doesn't have to be apartments, that's also helpful. Density can still fit your community aesthetic, whatever that is.
Yeah, you can always point towards Daybreak as a dense community that has houses, townhouses, apartments, all that stuff. So I think this has been really helpful. We're up against our time. Any additional thoughts, please throw them in the chat and we will make sure it gets incorporated.
Thanks, Tom. Trustee Holbrook, I've got my transportation slide up here. If you want to give us a quick intro to transportation, it's last but certainly not least. I'm sure we have some more stories to share around this topic.
You bet. Thank you. And I loved that last comment about the structured density because that actually incorporates very well with transportation and some of the structures involved. I always like to tell people that if you're going to do land use and planning around your community, you're not going to put an apartment building in a cul-de-sac if it is going to create a challenge for the transportation. So if there's a strategic way to look at your city and develop it as though here's how the density is going to look, and all of those density elements are going to be incorporated strategically so that you can access transportation, which is roads, and then of course transit as well. So these, as you can see, are some of the top questions that we get to hear at UTA. But it also blends every other element that we've been talking about within that framework, because when you think about a transit-oriented development site or some other transit component, there is typically a density something in there, whether it's an office building is considered a density, or it's a housing. Obviously, people don't care about the commercial side as nearly as much as housing, which is a very personal thing. And so we get to hear a lot of, why should we invest in any infrastructure like UTA when COVID just changed the whole dynamic? And that is a great question. The thing that I say really quickly is that it is not going to just be COVID without any long-range solutions. Yes, we do have a challenging situation right now, but again, these topics are not like the short-range, short-term problems. They are all things that we have to discuss moving forward. I wanted to encourage anybody to give me some, to give everybody some feedback and background on any transportation, whether it's roads or transit, and kind of get some perspective of what you're hearing from your residents and maybe share that with the group.
I know there are transportation stories, so now's your moment.
Well, I'm going to jump in because I live in Salt Lake City and do not own a car. So I rely on transit to get around. And even though the volume of riders is way down, there's still a fair number of people. I primarily ride tracks and still see a good number of people, and they are mostly the essential workers that don't have the option of staying at home and telecommuting. So it is still a very important thing to for us to have. And it's also another aspect of it is that one of the arguments that I have to make a lot when I'm talking with people is that the funds that we put into transit should be looked at as investments in our community. And rather than, we shouldn't be looking at transit as something that is losing money. It's an investment in our community. It provides a service to essential workers, a lot of whom don't have any other affordable option for transportation.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. During the height of the restrictions back in April, we still carried 41,000 riders a day on our system as a whole. And those were very much the demographic that Mike just mentioned.
So I'll chip in. This is Clark Wilkson, Mayor of Centerville. So that question has come up many times with COVID. Do we need mass transit still? I think it's very short-sighted to think that just because we're working at home presently right now, and I agree that there will be more working at home now. There's been large companies that have come out and said, hey, we're just going to continue to have our people work from home after it happens. But you still, Lisa might not have this problem down in Springdale, but up here along the Wasatch Front, you have to move people from place to place. And when you start talking about, and I don't like the word density either, when you start talking about apartments and multifamily housing, you're going to have a lot of people also that in those that will not have more than maybe one car or form of transportation. And you're always going to have, as Mike just said, essential workers and some not, and even some professional people that use transit. And with our growth, it's very short-sighted if we do not, if we take that approach that, oh, people aren't going to have to move around now because we figured out how to work from home. Well, there's more than just work in this life. There's events you have to get to. There's kids that have to get from Provo to Salt Lake. There's getting down to Salt Lake if you're on the outskirts to activities that are down in Salt Lake. So it's a very short-sighted approach. That's one of the things we've been hailed for, a city of our size along the Wasatch Front, that we've had such a great transportation system. The other thing, just on the density issue, don't mix up higher density with cheaper living, because a lot of these higher densities are as expensive as a house is. So developers are killing it right now, and they're going to build as much as they can because they are raking in the profits, because I have clients in that field. And some areas you're getting charged for those little apartments as much as you are for homes. So that's an issue we got to face as well too.
Thank you so much for that, Mayor. Yes, we also have another question that's come through, and it says, this person would like to know how you guys address these issues when the council is divided about them, or when the planning staff and council have different approaches to the issues. Can anybody give some feedback on that?
Katie, maybe some clarification. Are you talking about density, housing, or what exactly? Or was it a broad question?
Well, it came through, the question just came through for right now, so I'm guessing it's on the conversation that we're talking right now. But if anyone has anything else to add for any of the other sessions too, that would be great.
Now, this is Mayor Hale. This is where you need a professional staff in your community development section who have gathered the statistics we've bantered around here, and they take their planning commission or city council and go one-on-one with them and explain it in a way that is very difficult to argue against. What we've been talking about is the best way in almost every situation. There are exceptions, but most of the time, higher density transportation, higher cost per square foot in an apartment building is the way it's going. And we're not going to have, in Midvale, we're not going to have 5-acre plots ever. And they're all gone. And so people are crying now that we've got no place that they can put anything larger than a half an acre. Well, the price of land is so expensive. One of the questions earlier today was, could you afford the house? Could you buy your house now? Absolutely not. I bought my house for $21,500 in 1973. Now we've added on twice, so it's got more square foot in it. There's no way. I'd have to probably add 3 zeros on to come up with the price of my house now. And so it's got to be rationally discussed and factually argued, and then ask a person that is, hopefully they can think through these arguments and see if they can come up with a counter argument. My guess is they're going to run up against a wall, and they won't have a good counter argument other than, we don't want that kind here. And that doesn't work.
If I can just very quickly piggyback on the mayor's, I know we're out of time, but in Clearfield, we were that community that if there ever was one that was anti-growth and density, it was us, because we had seen it done so poorly and were reeling from the effects of it. But the biggest thing that switched our entire council to being behind growth and the density in particular as a tool was to invest. And it took a couple of years for us to go over, to update our market studies, looks at our downtown area plan, but basically figure out who we were and where we wanted to go and what we wanted the future to look like, so that density wasn't, and even growth in housing wasn't a conversation that we were going to have in a bubble. But we understood what we needed with the data that you've already mentioned, Mayor. We understood what we needed and could define where we wanted things to go, where it would be beneficial, where it would be a detriment, and could back it with numbers. And we went from a council that had a moratorium on any type of multifamily or density and growth to one that unanimously passed, huge downtown, changes in our zoning, and have completely done a 180. But it took having data, information, and a more holistic look at us for all of us to have that change of heart.
So we really appreciate everybody being flexible on the fly with us here and participating in one big conversation. My hope is that everybody heard something in many of these stories and experiences that you could pull out and say, that's something I can use, or, wow, I need to follow up with that person because it sounds like they've been exactly where I am. And we had hoped to summarize a little bit more and pull out some key takeaways together, but you're going to have to synthesize a little bit on your own. So I appreciate your being flexible. We want to just close out. We've had to make a couple of adjustments to our agenda by presenting this model. And so it's clear that you're all having conversations that can be pretty tough, from people being upset, only communicating via email because they want to share it on Facebook, all these things. And really the goal of any interaction is to try to have as productive a conversation as possible. And so this model, like I said, is fairly straightforward, but hopefully in its simplicity, it will be useful to you. It's basically 3 L's. You listen, you learn, and then you lead. As many of you know, especially who are elected officials, being a leader means making decisions. And oftentimes those decisions are not gonna, never are those decisions going to please everybody. And yet this may present a way to take somebody who's really worked up or really dug in and help them move forward. So that I have training in conflict resolution, and there's a pretty basic concept in mediation known as going below the line. You want to move somebody from their position, I don't want this housing development, to their interests. I don't want this housing development because I believe it's going to cause traffic issues and I'm already frustrated about the amount of traffic I deal with, or whatever. So that's the listening portion, is let them talk. Let them get some things off their chest. I know that it's often very tempting to jump right in and say, I've heard this before and here's what I have to tell you about it. But nobody's going to listen to you until they feel like they've been listened to. And then that second point, listen for what might be motivating their question. What is their interest, not just their position? Then move on to learning. So, I appreciate you sharing that with me. Maybe can you help me understand one point a little bit better? Help me understand what you mean when you say traffic is going to get worse. Like, do you see a lot of traffic on your street? Is it just when you get out on the highway? Are you not seeing full buses? Like help me understand a little bit more. Ask probing questions to dig a little bit deeper and understand a little bit better where they're coming from. Without that, it's a Coveyism, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So this is that learning portion where you're really trying to dive a little bit deeper and understand a little bit more where this person's coming from. And then finally, lead. Whether you're a city staffer, a local elected official, at some point you've got to say, well, let's move forward. And even if it's something that they don't like, help them understand that you've heard them, you've understood them, and here's where I think we should go. Share your understanding from them. Here's what I've heard you say. Did I get that right? Do I understand where you're coming from? And then speak factually. Many of you have spoken to the need for data. And then a really important point is, here's what I'm going to do. Or would you be willing to do this? Would you be willing to maybe grab your neighbors and form a neighborhood meeting where I could come and talk with all of you about this? I know that might be the wrong thing for many of you. You might not come out alive, but share maybe an idea on what a next step for them and what a next step for you would be, so that they feel like there's something actionable coming out. And so, again, listen, learn, lead. We were hoping to kind of demonstrate that for you with a couple of our volunteers, but we're at time. Hopefully, I've seen many of you doing this already, using the chat box to share ideas or react to something somebody said. So I'm glad that we have that captured. As Katie has said, this presentation and dialogue, along with all the others, are being recorded and will be shared back via the league site, I believe. But so look for, you can go back and read the chat. There's a lot of good dialogue happening in there, which we weren't able to call out. But again, we appreciate you being flexible. We appreciate your time. Katie, is there anything else we need to do to close out here today?
No, I just want to thank you and the other presenters for taking the time to put this very helpful session together. And thank you to all the attendees for joining today. I look forward to seeing you again throughout the conference. And that's it. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.